Imagine a time when the world moved a little slower, when engines didn't hide behind plastic, and when every motorcycle felt like a living thing with a heartbeat of metal and fire. Long before today's polished machines and fuel-injected perfection, the roads of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s were filled with bikes that had personality: scrappy little commuters, loud street racers, proud American cruisers, and European machines built by hand in tiny workshops. Some were loved deeply. Others were forgotten as soon as newer models arrived. Yet each one carried a story of freedom, rebellion, craftsmanship, and dreams of speed. Today, we are traveling back in time to remember 10 motorcycles that once ruled the road, but slowly disappeared from memory. Let's bring them back, at least for a moment. 1. The BSA Bantam. In the late 1940s and early 50s, the BSA Bantam was everywhere. It was the bike you learned to ride on, the bike you took to work, the bike you trusted when money was tight. Small, simple, and lightweight, the Bantam wasn't glamorous, but it was dependable. Farmers used it. Delivery boys loved it. Teenagers dreamed of owning one. Its origins were unusual. It was based on a German DKW design taken after WWII. But as Japanese motorcycles entered the market in the 60s, the Bantam's tiny engine couldn't keep up. More power, better reliability, and new styling pushed it aside. Yet for thousands, the Bantam was their first taste of freedom, buzzing through the countryside like a loyal old friend. 2. The Zundap KS601 Green Elephant. This German powerhouse was a beast in its day, big, tough, and built to survive anything. Nicknamed the Green Elephant because of its size and military green paint, the KS601 was loved by long-distance riders who wanted strength over speed. It carried families on vacations, hauled sidecars full of luggage, and conquered alpine passes without complaint. But by the mid-60s, Zundap struggled financially. Japanese bikes offered smoother rides, electric starters, and modern looks. Riders who once loved heavy steel machines wanted lighter, faster ones. Today, very few KS601s remain on the road. Those who remember it recall its sound, a deep, proud rumble you felt in your chest more than your ears. 3. The Ariel Leader 1958 to 1965. When the Ariel Leader arrived, people were stunned. It didn't look like anything else. Part scooter, part motorcycle, wrapped in elegant, streamlined panels. It was futuristic, bold, and surprisingly practical, with unclosed weather protection and built-in storage. Postmen, commuters, and touring riders all loved it. But the Leader's uniqueness also worked against it. Purists didn't want a covered-up motorcycle. Mechanics struggled with the unusual bodywork. And once cheap, reliable Japanese two-strokes flooded the market, the Leader faded into obscurity. Still, for many riders of the early 60s, the Ariel Leader was magic, a motorcycle that dared to be different. 4. Hodaka Ace 100-196-41978. If you grew up in the late 60s or 70s, you probably knew someone with a Hodaka. The Ace 100 was a small dual sport that looked like a toy but rode like a champion. Lightweight, simple, and easy to repair, it was the perfect first real motorcycle. Kids rode it through fields. Adults used it to commute. Everyone admired its spirit. But as off-road biking became more serious, big companies like Yamaha and Honda pushed Hodaka aside with more advanced machines. Hodaka didn't have the money to compete. By 1978, it was gone. Yet for thousands of families, the Ace 100 was the bike that filled summers with dust, laughter, and freedom. 5. The Indian Chief 1950 to 1953 final years. Before Harley dominated American culture, Indian motorcycles shared the spotlight, and many say they did it with more class. The Indian Chief of the early 50s had sweeping fenders, a deep exhaust note, and a proud native-inspired badge. It was America's road king. But financial crises, poor corporate decisions, and rising competition ended the brand by 1953. For 2 decades, the Chief faded into legend. People who rode them still talk about how it felt like sitting on a thundercloud made of chrome and steel. Though Indian eventually returned, the original 50s Chief remains a ghost of a lost American era. 6. Bultaco Metralla 1960s. Spain produced one of the best handling motorcycles of the 60s, the Bultaco Metralla. Lightweight, fast, and nimble, it was a dream for riders who loved twisty backroads. Motorcycle magazines praised it endlessly, calling it a giant killer for beating larger bikes in races. Yet Bultaco's success didn't last. Economic troubles, strikes, and pressure from Japan crushed the small Spanish manufacturer. The Metralla vanished almost overnight. Today, collectors treasure them, but most people have never heard of Bultaco at all. A shame, because this little Spanish rocket once ruled European roads. 7. NSU Quickly 1953 to 1963. The NSU Quickly wasn't a motorcycle in the traditional sense, more like a motorized bicycle. But in post-war Europe, it changed daily life. Affordable, reliable, and cheap to run, the Quickly carried workers to factories, students to school, and families on weekend trips. It was the people's machine. As cars became more affordable in the mid-60s, the Quickly lost its place. People wanted more power, more comfort, and more speed. Still, many older Europeans remember the software of its tiny engine and the feeling of being young, hopeful, and finally mobile. 8. Suzuki T200 Invader 1960s. Before Suzuki became a powerhouse, they built odd and experimental small bikes, and the T200 Invader was one of the best. A lightweight two-stroke twin, it had surprising power and a playful nature. Riders loved its sound, its agility, and its personality. But with the arrival of the bigger, faster, legendary Suzuki GT series in the 70s, the T200 disappeared. Most were ridden hard and thrown away, never restored. Today, finding one in good condition is like finding a forgotten treasure, proof of Suzuki's early creativity. 9. Yamaha XS1 1970. Before the famous XS650 arrived, Yamaha released the XS1, a big, bold parallel twin designed to compete with British motorcycles. It had charm, character, and a raw mechanical feel that riders adored. But Yamaha quickly replaced it with improved versions, making the XS1 a short-lived experiment. Most buyers waited for the updated models, so only a small number were ever sold. As a result, the XS1 became one of Yamaha's rarest bikes, a stepping stone in the brand's evolution that almost nobody notices today. 10. The Triumph T120 TT Special 1960s. The TT Special was a fire-breathing race-tuned version of the Triumph Bonneville, made for desert racing and flat-track events. Loud, aggressive, and stripped down, it became a favorite of California riders who wanted raw power. But by the 70s, stricter emissions rules, rising insurance costs, and competition from Japanese four-cylinders ended its reign. Today, the TT Special lives quietly in garages and collections, remembered only by those who rode its thunder through dusty American backroads. When we look back at these forgotten machines, it's easy to wonder how something so loved could fade away. But that's the nature of time. New technology arrives, companies rise and fall, riders change their tastes, and the world keeps moving forward. Yet each of these motorcycles mattered. They carried workers through dawn fog, teenagers through their first taste of independence, and families on weekend adventures long before highways became crowded. They were made with care, ridden with pride, and remembered with warmth. So tell me in the comments, which forgotten motorcycle would you bring back if you could? And if you enjoy these trips into the past, please like and subscribe. I'm just a small channel trying to keep old memories alive, one story at a time.